With the separately managed accounts, let's have a chat about that. What exactly are they?
A separately managed account is the easiest way to think of a separately managed account. It's like a managed fund in some regards, but in other regards it's more like, in the olden days, I can remember you used to be able to go to a broker, give them a limited power of attorney, and they would manage a basket of securities on your behalf, given some, specific instructions. That's what a SMA is. So I've invested in our SMAs. So for example, I went to our portfolio manager 2 years ago, and I'm a sort of a typical InvestSmart client. I said I was a growth sort of client, so 7 to 10 years investment time frame. I put all my assets in, and I got a dreadful health check score. It said I was about 60% diversified. The reason being is I was well overweight Aussie equities and I was well overweight Australian equities. I sold an investment property earlier this year, and with those proceeds I went into the InvestSmart growth portfolio, so that gave me diversification across a number of asset classes. And I also invested in the Intelligent Investor income portfolio, which is about 20 ASX stocks that they pick. And the reason I did that is because when I looked in my Aussie equity exposure, I only had like 3 stocks. It's not only diversification across asset classes, but it's also diversification within the asset class. Like most Australians, we go, oh yeah, I've got Aussie equities, but you only got like the banks and Woolworths and maybe something else. Well, you've got like 3 or 4, or the banks, you've got 3 or 4 stocks. That's not well diversified across Aussie equities. So I used the International Equities SMA, and I used the InvestSmart Growth, and I got up to, I think I'm about 92%, and I'm okay with that. I'm still overweight Aussie equities a little bit, underweight international equities a bit, but for me, that's fine. When I go to my portfolio manager, I can see all of the individual stocks that I own underneath that SMA. So, whereas if you go to a fund manager, you just see the unit price. Yeah, you don't see all of the actual stocks they own within that fund. An SMA shows you, the transparency is beautiful. It shows you everything that you own within that SMA. It's just like looking at your broking account and just seeing all the stocks you own. And if you ever decide that we're bad at managing your, portfolio of stocks, well, you can ring us up and we can either sell all those stocks and give you back the cash, or we can transfer over all of those securities into your own broking account and you can start managing that portfolio yourself. So you have complete transparency. You are always the beneficial owner of each of those individual stocks in that portfolio. You can see exactly which ones are going up and which ones are going down, and as a portfolio, you've made some money and you have always had beneficial ownership of that. So if you ring us up and ask for those all to come back to you, there's no tax consequences because you've always been the beneficial owner. So you can then go and sell 5 of the 20 and keep the other 15 or do whatever you want. It's not until you sell them yourself that you actually have any tax consequence.
Transparency is so important, isn't it? Because like many people, who previously invested in managed funds, you just really never knew what your money was going towards.
Yeah, you have no transparency in a managed fund. You have no idea what they're invested in. Some of the fund managers might tell you what their top 10 holdings are, and usually that's fairly delayed. It might be top 10 holdings from 3 months ago, whether they're the top 10 holdings now, who knows? With an SMA, you know exactly what you own. We send out emails continuously. You've got all your reporting 24/7. You just come there, you go, I own these 20 stocks. Some of them are gone up, some of them are gone down, and overall I've made this much money. And it's there, continuously. We write a lot about, when we rebalance those portfolios, why we rebalance those portfolios, why we've sold or bought different stocks. That's the beauty of Intelligent Investor and Eureka Report.
And the cost as well of using an SMA, it's quite a bit cheaper.
Yeah, it's much cheaper. So for our InvestSmart diversified portfolio, so we've got a number of diversified portfolios. So we've got the InvestSmart Growth and the InvestSmart Income portfolios, and that's around about 8 to 12 ETFs that give you diversification over, and we use ETF, exchange traded funds, because it gives us that really easy, cheap exposure to the asset class, because we don't really care too much for those portfolios about picking individual stocks. They are 77 basis points, so 0.77%. Our average peers are around about 1.76. So we've done a lot of work on looking at other peers of those other fund managers that are active fund managers that are similar, and they're about 1.76. So we're about 1% below most of the other managers on average in Australia. Then we have our 3 sector-specific portfolios under InvestSmart, which is fixed interest, property and international. They're also 77 basis points. And they're again using ETFs just to get that exposure. And we really did those for plugging your gaps. We call it plugging your gaps, Tony. So in your portfolio manager, when you work out you've got a bad like me, 60 sort of percent health check score, you can go in and just plug your gaps. So most Australians will be underweight international, so you can just go and get an affordable, actively managed portfolio of ETFs for just international, and that plugs your gaps, and your health check score will improve a bit. And then we've got our 2, what we call our sort of Ferraris. They're a little bit higher risk. They're direct Australian equities. And they're picking individual stocks. So we've got our 10 analysts at Intelligent Investor. They've been going well for 15 years. That's why we bought them. They get their recommendations. I think they're probably the only investment newsletter in the country that gets independently audited every year by Grant Thornton. I know that they've outperformed the All Ords Accumulated Index by 3.5% for the last 15 years. So those guys are really good at that value investing, finding undervalued stocks, and generally speaking, they have about 20 Aussie equities in each of those portfolios, and they've got the growth portfolio and they've got the income portfolio. I think they're 97 basis points, so we charge a little bit more for those because they're actively managed.